Welcome back to Startup RealTalk, where we unpack the real, unpolished truth behind scaling companies, leading people, and building the future of work. I am your host, Kristina Karcic-Ehret, and today we're diving into a topic that doesn't get talked about enough, but absolutely shapes whether founders can build, lead, and truly scale: finding your founder's voice. Because here's the truth: being a founder isn't about having a great product, it's about being able to communicate what you're building in a way that people can feel, whether it's investors, customers, your team, and even yourself on the hard days. Your founder voice is what creates clarity in chaos. It's what helps build trust before you have all the proof. And it's what helps you lead with conviction without pretending you have all the answers. Today we're going to unpack what it really takes to find that voice, how it evolves, how you protect it, and how you use it to build a brand, a culture, and a business that people want to be a part of. I couldn't think of a better person to explore this with than our guest today, Emeka Kanu. Emeka is the founder and CEO of Ani, where you can find them at alwaysani.com, a corporate experiential wellness platform designed to help companies attract and retain talent, build community, increase team engagement, and improve employee wellness through enhanced access to inclusive cultural spaces and experiences. Before founding Ani, Emeka worked in a global partnership at Google, served as a management consultant at Deloitte, and taught mathematics with Teach America and KIPP. He holds an MBA from the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth and a BS in economics from Trinity College. We are so excited to have you today. Welcome. I'm really excited to dive deep into this topic.
Kristina, thanks for having me. Really happy to be here, and happy to chat about all things founder life and founder journey.
Amazing. All right, let's dive right in. So let's start with the founder voice origin story, right? When did you first realize that you had something to say as a founder, and what helped you stop borrowing other people's founder script and start using your own?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that comes from the space that I'm in, right? So I'm in this HR future of work space, but also in the intersection of technology, of course, but also wellness. So because of that, you can sort of there's an opportunity to copy the branding or marketing or ethos of one of those different segments that we work in. But because many of the companies because of the sort of intersection at which we work, there wasn't really a company or founder to quote unquote copy or to replicate. So we had to develop that by default. And a lot of that is definitely based on, I think, my personality as the founder. I think you have to sprinkle that in. You also want to keep it professional, especially in a HR focused product. But I think we were somewhat forced to find our founder voice, and because we were trying to bring these different elements of work and of business together, we had to find a good combination for that. So just to get a bit more specific, when we think about founder voice from an Ani perspective, we have to think about, of course, there is the experience providers that we work with. There are also the companies that we serve, our corporate clients, and then there are the individual employees. And we have to have a specific way to message and communicate our mission and our vision to each one of those, let's call it, top three stakeholders.
That's excellent. And you mentioned a couple key elements there, right? Is that when you're finding your founder's voice, it's not necessarily the same voice for each of those audiences, right? And being able to find that voice that's going to attract them, but most importantly, keep them there, right? Is the critical element of that. And just as everyone always says, when you're building something, knowing who your audience is, right? That's a
100%.
critical aspect of it. So thank
100%.
you. So let's dive in. Why this? Why you moment? So in particular, like if we talk about Ani, it sits at the intersection of wellness, culture, community, and talent retention. What personal experiences or observations made you believe this had to exist and that you were the one to build it?
Yeah, so the idea of Ani really comes back to me working at Google. So I was working at Google for about 3.5, 4 years in their New York City, Chelsea office. And when I started working at Google, we had these really incredible, as they called them, cultural access benefits, where we could go to places like the MoMA or the Met or the Whitney for free by flashing our corporate ID, because the organization itself, Google, had a corporate membership. And and it's funny, and I won't name the platform, but we had this other sort of third party perks or benefits platform that I'll just be honest, wasn't very good, and I thought didn't really have the offerings that people were using. So I thought I first started thinking about building something in the employee benefits or wellness or some sort of space, team engagement space. And then I had a very somewhat random conversation with an HR leader at Google. And she happened to mention that our cultural access benefits, those ones where we could go to museums and other cultural experiences, that those are actually our second most utilized ancillary benefit category, only behind the parental support benefit. So of course, we're not talking about retirement, healthcare, dental, right? But those sort of extra add-ons. And I thought, wow, that's pretty highly utilized, because everyone that I know that either has a child, wants to have a child, wants to adopt a child, all these folks use those benefits. So I thought that's pretty highly utilized. I of course then did my research on the space. One, figuring out, first discovering, there are bodies of studies around experiential access, cultural access, these things, and their impact on wellness. Not only from a mental perspective, but also from a social perspective, right? People getting out there to a museum, going out there to a game, going out there to a show, and actually meeting people and engaging with them in real life has a myriad of wellness benefits for them. And then, of course, I did my real world research, which was, which other companies have these sort of benefits? And I saw Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Bloomberg, right? Very large, very successful organizations. And I thought, how could I build a platform that could not only replicate what the Googles and Goldmans of the world have for those smaller companies that can't afford those sort of benefits, but on top of that, how do I build upon that to even dramatically overshoot what those large companies have by creating this platform focused on experiences? And the last thing I always really want to focus on mentioning is, not only is this good for, of course, the employee and the employers, but when I was first thinking about Ani, very early on, we were still kind of coming out of COVID, and I thought, what if there was a new way for these both for-profit, but especially the nonprofit cultural and sort of experiential organizations? What if there's a new way for them to get access to corporate dollars? Yes, they have their traditional corporate memberships for their large companies, but most companies aren't going to get those. So how can you actually get a new platform that can engage a wider breadth of both local professionals, but also corporations? So I think Ani helps do that as well.
It really does. It helps fill a gap in a number of different ways, right? So I can tell you, as being part of a startup community for the last 10 years, 10 years ago, we did have a lot more flexibility with funds and employee experiences. And when it was done well, you really did create a sense of community, which is critical for retention, right? And at that particular time, it was an important element because talent was hard to come by. Now,
Yeah.
the environment has changed. And I think what companies need to be mindful of, and founders need to be mindful of in particular, is making sure that the people that are staying are not just staying for a paycheck, but they're staying because they believe they belong to something bigger, right? And that is the sense of community. So now that we no longer have that money that we can invest, your platform becomes even more critical, right? Because now you're giving them access to opportunities where they can really connect, build that community, and basically evolve, right? So that this way there is a sense of, yes, I want to be here. Yes, I belong here and I want to be engaged. So oftentimes we just always relate it straight to like what we're doing, how we're doing, work, work, work. But the truth is that it builds outside of work as well. And it builds that connection, which then obviously is going to keep them motivated to keep performing.
For sure. And to even go a little further there, it's pretty interesting, right? So, I mean, you're so spot on, right? I think when I was actually resigning from Google, it was like when the tech market was starting to crash well, definitely on the stock market, but also on the funding market, the within the sort of VC funding ecosystem, right? Mid 2022, right? This is when things started to really come down, and it's interesting sort of seeing the evolution of what that looks like from a corporate spend, startup spend perspective. And especially when you then feed into the concept or the reality of all the layoffs that have happened since then, right? Over the last 3 years or so. I think I left Google before that layoff happened, but that was like the first big layoff ever, I think, in the company's history, at least to my knowledge. So those sort of things changed quite a bit. But it's interesting because you have these startups or sort of smaller organizations that are typically either in growth mode, steady state mode, or let's call it optimization mode, aka layoff mode. But in any one of those modes, at the end of the day, unless you're dissolving the company, you have to retain at least top talent, right? And in fact, in that third scenario of optimization / layoff mode, it's actually really important that you retain top talent, because you've gotten rid of some people. It can be very easy for the other top talent to have remained, to think that something else may happen, right? Or that the company's not going to recover. So it's actually extremely important to retain those people. And one of the things that we always see, and there are studies to back these up, is that of course, there's a myriad of factors that tie into retention, right? Connectivity to corporate culture, alignment on mission, and sort of vision from top leadership. But one of the most significant factors is someone's belief that they have a best friend at work. So a lot of what we think about, what we do at Ani, is we're providing access to museums, Broadway shows, Yankees games. Now we're actually going into direct wellness with a partnership with like Bathhouse and these sort of saunas and sort of cold plunge communal spaces. Is how do you therefore build more opportunities to have people feel like they have that best friend at work, or at least that they like their teammates, right? So that's a lot of what we do, besides just the wellness piece and getting people to live more holistic lives. It is really trying to impact that bottom line from a retention perspective, but also in terms of people's connectivity and hopefully their productivity.
Absolutely. And I love it. Like, bring it back to that bottom line, right? A lot of people will see this as fluffy. It's not fluffy. It can directly impact the performance and obviously the income that's coming back from that, right? The return. So I think it's really, really critical to separate that. And yes, it is to a certain extent a nice to have, but without it, you will have a direct impact on how your team is performing and obviously the return on investment you're going to get from it.
Yeah, and especially as you think about, honestly, at the end of the day, and maybe you don't choose Ani, that's fine. But at the end of the day, you do have to have a corporate culture. It has to be something, right?
Absolutely.
It can't just be it can't just be nothing. And I think when you think about, or when we think about different generations, and this is the last thing that I'll say, and I'll let you move on from my sort of ramblings here. But one of the things that we heard, let's say starting a year or two ago, was, we're really looking for ways to engage our employees that doesn't focus on drinking alcohol. Basically trying to diversify away from the traditional happy hour. And a lot of that is because maybe just attitudes towards drinking and work have changed, but also a lot of that is because of the emergence of Gen Z into the workforce, and they are the least alcohol consuming generation of all time. So in a space or in a company where you need to be engaging with a younger generation, you have to be uplifting them to management and senior roles over the next 3, 4, 5, 8 years. It's something to really think about, is how are you engaging people, and are you building the corporate culture that those people want to be a part of and want to stay in?
Absolutely. And you're seeing it more and more. I mean, and it's real, because the sales of alcohol are down, and you're seeing more and more people see the results of what happened from 2020, right? When you were an adult and you had nothing to do. So you were drinking, right? But you saw that impact on your health. So there's more and more people that are leaning away from it. So I agree with you. I think that's a really critical aspect of it. So thank you for bringing that up, because it really, when you're trying to create an inclusive environment, that's a big piece of it. So with that said, how did you find language that feels authentic, not generic, while still landing with HR leaders and executives who are buying the outcome?
So first, there may be 3 steps, but I can think about 2 from the top of my head. First is I had to decide what my voice was going to be, right? I had to decide how I felt about these things, how I personally felt about the benefits that I used to have, and how Ani was trying to replicate it for other companies. So that was step one. Step two was I actually started meeting HR leaders. So just for context, when I first started Ani, I had zero network in arts and culture, entertainment, and zero network within the HR people space, which is not how you found a company. That is not the smart thing, but I did it anyways. And it was important to start meeting HR leaders, people leaders, because that's the only way for you to understand how they speak, how they think, how they verbalize things, or how they vocalize things. So a part of that figuring out the messaging and the communication style was combining those two things. So there's the authenticity, literally, for how I feel, how I view our product, how I view the impact that we can make and that we've already made for other folks, and then still coupling that with, yes, what do the HR leaders think? How do they communicate? And actually, that third piece is, how will the CEO or the CFO that have to buy in and sign off on this spend think about it? So I think those three things are what I'm always working with. And of course, it's always evolving too, right? When we first started Ani, our only experiences were museums. Then we got performing arts and a bit of sports, and now we're adding more sports and more sort of immersive experiences. And now we're sort of really branching out. So as we continue to evolve the product and how we serve our clients, those three legs of our messaging, of our communication style, will continue to evolve as well.
And you brought up something interesting, and it's really unique to a certain extent to this particular area, is that when you start selling a product, you're used to going to the stakeholder, and that's typically like if you're doing cybersecurity, you go to the CIO, CTO, right? It's very specific. In our world, it gets really complex because
Yes.
there are times where the chief, and if it's done right, it should be the chief people officer, the head of HR. But there are many organizations where that's the first hurdle you have to get through, right?
Yep.
And then it's the second, the CFO. And sometimes it's even the CEO that gets involved. So you did not pick an easy area to get into, especially taking into account, that's crazy. You didn't even have a network, but that shows your resiliency, your grit, your ability to truly connect with this particular space, to be able to come in from the outside and build that network. Because I've seen you've done a phenomenal job. But it goes back to everything you're talking about here and making sure that you do find your voice and how to connect it. So I love that.
Thank you. Really appreciate that.
So now we're going to turn to turning a values-driven idea into a scalable business, inclusive culture, and experiences can sound nice to have, as we said before, until you connect it to engagement and retention. And so we talked a little bit about this previously, but we're going to dive a little deeper. How do you tell the Annie story in a way that's both heart-led as well as business hard?
Yeah. It depends, and I'll just be honest here. It depends on the industry that I'm speaking to. And I say this because let's say you're a mid-sized law firm, or you're a mid-sized investment bank or financial institution, or you're a startup. Well, because the largest versions or the largest companies in those industries invest in this space. Many people might not know this, but almost all the bulge bracket banks have these sort of cultural access programs. The Googles of the world obviously have them, and many of the, let's call it AM top 10, maybe top 20 law firms have them. So because of that, there's a bit of competitiveness that smaller companies feel with their larger incumbents, right? So there's that piece that you do communicate, saying, hey, well, they do this. They have these incredible perks, benefits, offerings for their employees, and they're able to attract and retain lots of talent. If you can't beat them on salary all the time, trying to beat them on the holistic package that you provide those employees is another route, especially, again, given and this is going back to my earlier comment around Gen Z. Gen Z, of course, they care about their money for sure. Everyone does, right? This is America. But they are a bit different in terms of how they prioritize what they're getting from their employers. They do look a bit more at the holistic package of what that offer entails. So that's a part of it, and I guess that's more of the head part. On the heart part, and honestly, I always try to combine the head and the heart, right? Every time that I speak, I don't say, "Oh, this will make your employees happy." I mean, that's cool, but like, what does that mean, right? I always talk about making them, or having your employees live more holistic lives, having your employees be able to use Ani, and of course, we see this through the ticketing data, right? Almost all Ani experiences are booked with 2 or more people. Very rarely that we get a one-person ticket, right? So people are using this for in their day-to-day lives, and for us, a lot of that is for the employer. The benefit of that is when they're taking their spouse to the New York Botanical Garden, or they're taking their child to Harry Potter and the Cursed Child on Broadway, or they're going with their family to a Yankees game, all through Ani. There is that recognition that not only do you have access because of your employer, so it's tying it back to that, whether you like it or not, that sort of concept of employer loyalty, which is good for the employer, but also because most of our corporate clients will add dollars to people's accounts. So one thing I haven't mentioned is that a part of Ani is one of my clients calls them Ani bucks, but the employer can actually add dollars to your account. So you get a discounted price or sort of enhanced price. Plus, you can use your own money, plus your employer cash if they've given you some. So there's that ability not only for them to tie back that experience to the employer and therefore the sort of internal brand of the employer, but because you can provide those corporate dollars and because of some of the functionality on the app, like being able to invite your colleagues to experiences, now you have this ability to encourage people to connect with their colleagues outside of the 4 walls of your office, which again, we know that teams that engage each other, teams that connect, typically operate more effectively because of that connectivity, that trust, and quite frankly, liking each other more.
Yeah, exactly. It goes exactly as you said, it goes back to the community. In addition, you also brought up something that is really critical for founders and that they don't always recognize early on. And actually, I'm going to talk about the importance of it in this particular market. And you talk about looking holistically at what you're offering. That is a really key piece. And the earlier you do it, from my perspective, the better you are. And the reason why I say this particular environment is the better way to actually build is because it's not where we were at 5 years ago, or 3 years ago, where talent was very hard to come by. I apologize. Talent was very hard to come by. People were throwing money, specifically when you had tech roles, right? Just throwing money at it. And it created this environment which was very hard to sustain, right? But when you take a step back and you build with intent and you build holistically, bringing in a product like Ani to help support, help create that community, and help offset some of the stuff that employees do find valuable, then you can grow sustainably, right? And it's these markets, it's the downturn markets where you really can take a step and build this out so that when it turns, because it inevitably will, now you're prepared for it. And as you said, it's extremely competitive because when you're a small organization, you are always, regardless of how many times we say, don't compare yourself to an Amazon, a Google, like the person who wants to work there and work for a smaller business are typically 2 different profiles, right? But the truth of the matter is that people do fluctuate between the 2, right? And then you're keeping that connection of like, yeah, I had this previously, I have it now. So I think you're offering something that is extremely valuable, and you just keyed it. It's about thinking holistically and thinking with intent as you build out your organization. And then another thing you said that I think I want to highlight for founders as well is that understanding that, yes, not only is it the personas you're selling to, but it's also the verticals you're selling to, right? So depending on what industry you're in, if you're in tech, right, you need to know what financial services is going to need versus And I went to say healthcare, but I'm like, no, they're both the same. It's so like highly regulated,
Yeah.
but right. And versus another, like, I'm trying, why can't, of course, something's not
But
coming to
but
mind.
but but I mean, to this point, right? It's like, if, for example, and I won't name them, but we're probably bringing you on a client soon in the creative field. When we think about creative focused clients, let's call it, film and cinema, entertainment, movies, marketing, advertising, PR, comms, even less so them, but still sort of in that realm. It's funny because of the history of our product, first starting in sort of arts and culture, now performing arts, now sports, now some other things. But because of that history, we provide a lot of information on what's going on culturally in the cities that we operate in today. And a part of our pitch to those creative companies, sort of again knowing them, is, oh well, besides the ability to use Ani for team connectivity, community building internally, just living more holistic life through your corporate profile with your family and friends outside of work. There's the ability to use Ani to sort of get the creative juices flowing before your next campaign. So use Ani, use all the benefits that you have. Go see a show, go to a museum, go see something that's going to get the creative juices flowing, and quite frankly, go as a team, because that team is going to have to get whatever mechanism that you use to start sticking ideas on the wall. Use Ani first, then come back to the office, and then put those ideas on the wall. So again, really understanding who you're speaking to and how the product can be leveraged for different use cases, even beyond what you sort of set out, even beyond what you state. I think overall, there's always this sort of edge case for specific either company sizes or company types.
I love that. And I love the example that you bring up. Like, it's not even something I would have thought of, but you're right. By making that investment, you're just continuing to pump fuel into the innovation, right? By making sure that they do, I think it's important to say two things. Number one, that they're getting an environment that can, spark that creativity. But then in addition to it, the possibility of expanding your paradigm, right? Because you might go to a show that you normally wouldn't, right? And you're going, and now you're seeing things from a different perspective, which also fuel the innovation machine. So I
For sure.
absolutely love what you bring up. And I love how you've taken the time and the care to understand the industries as well as your clients and their persona, which is critical to being successful. I love that. So now that we said that, now we're going to circle back basically to your background. So you've worked in Google partnership and consulting, high performance rooms. As a founder, what situation tested your confidence the most? And how did you learn to speak with authority before you had all the proof?
Okay. What situation tested my resolve the most? Was that what it was? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, every day in the early days, to be honest with you, I think, lots of rejection at the beginning. No one really wants to work with you. I think your ability, and again, this is me personally, my ability to communicate what Ani was or was going to become was not very clear. So I think just overcoming that and kind of failing and failing and losing and losing and failing and failing, that's the hardest part. But then you start to see those glimmers of success, and you still fail after you get that successful stuff too. I mean, you still fail. But I think that ability to have honest conversations with yourself is super helpful, and that's probably the strongest characteristic that I would say helps you overcome some of that, because you have to have the sort of honest conversations to say, why did that meeting go so poorly? Why didn't that person respond to the email? Sometimes they just didn't care. Sometimes it's just, they have other life things, and you are not important. But you have to still reflect and try to try to get better with those things. I don't remember if that answers your question. I sort of have flashbacks to all the rejections and everything, but yeah.
That 100% does. And I think it's really critical for people to be successful. The one thing we don't talk enough about is that you need resiliency and perseverance, right? And it goes back to what you said, like, you have to trip to be able to walk and run, right? It's just the reality of it. And if you don't go through those pain points, you're not going to evolve as a person. And most importantly, I personally feel you're going to have limited success if you don't come into it with the mindset you did, which is that growth mindset. It's that ability to learn. And I don't even like calling them mistakes because they're learning opportunities, right? But initially, they're a mistake. We walk out, and we've all been there. If you're a founder, you've said the wrong thing. You've gone in and you went into a sales approach either too salesy, not salesy enough, right? Like, we're all misstepping in order to be able to get up and run effectively, but most importantly, run. But with that comes the perseverance, the resiliency, and all of that comes with the growth mindset, right? So I really love that aspect, and that's a critical part for any founder to really embrace. And if you can't embrace that, you will at some point run into a wall.
So,
Thank you. Okay, so now what I really like to talk about is feedback loops and finding signals versus noise. Early on, everyone has an opinion, right? Whether it's your customer, your investor, your friends, your family. How do you decide what feedback shapes your founder voice versus what's going to dilute it?
so from a feedback perspective, I think about founder voice and its alignment to the company's mission or vision. Early on, someone, I believe they were in the art world specifically, but they're like, oh, okay, Emeka, so you're the founder and everything, but you seem to be like kind of the sort of chief curator of what's on the platform too. I'm like, oh, I've never thought about that, but kind of like, if I don't want something on there, I probably won't have it on there, right? Now that's because I'm still making most of the decisions at that point. But when I think about founder voice and the impact on feedback, you have to, one, be open to feedback. That's very important. And as a from a startup perspective, you have to be open to pivots, right? But you also have to have some sort of vision on what you want and what you want this product and hopefully company to be. So that's always a push and pull. I'll give you one example. Someone early on was like, "Oh, you should have axe throwing on the Omni platform." No shade to axe throwing, we're not going to have axe throwing, right? Like, we're not going to do that. That's just I'd have to have like 85% of users saying we need axe throwing for me to consider it. I'm just being honest. So, you need to be open to feedback. You have to be open to hearing others' thoughts, and especially from your users, obviously, right? Like, we have a quarterly survey. We try to get feedback as much as we can. Sometimes we'll get tickets to exclusive events from our experience partners. I usually will try to bring an HR leader or a current user of the app, and if it's a current user of the app, I pre-warn them saying, "Hey, I'm gonna kind of grill you on the app and ask you a bunch of questions," right? But that's how you get to understand what the issues are, how people are, what they're finding difficult about the app, but also what they like. So it really helps you not only double down on what you're doing right, double and triple down, but also, quite frankly, I use my users like my product development team. I ask them, which sports should we add next to the app? Hey, which venues do you guys recommend? I know infinitely less than my users. So just let them basically tell you, right? And then of course you still have to, again, that using that concept of founder voice, you still have to judge and assess and say, hey, is this a part of what we want to do? But also not only what we want to do we have the time and the resources to do that thing, right? So as the founder, you're in charge. You are running the business. You have to understand the logical implications of every decision.
Absolutely. And I want to hone in on a couple of things that you said. Number one, the importance of the customer voice, right? Because how many times do you see organizations run so hard on their mission or run so hard on the cool things the technology is creating, but forget the customer's voice and don't incorporate it? I've actually seen organizations that were unicorns all of a sudden overnight dissolve because they did not listen to their customer voice. But when you listen to the customer voice, you brought up another critical piece, is that it doesn't mean that everything they say gets turned back around and incorporated, you have to be mindful of what's serving your strategy, right? Making sure that the loudest voice is the only voice you hear, because that's not going to be good either, right? So making sure you take all those points into consideration. So again, it goes back to building with intent and understanding your strategy, the direction you want to go. And in particular for what you're doing, I'm sure there's also a component of it of, I want to say, your values, right? And whether or not that fits in, because it might not fit in. It might be something your clients want, but you're like, hey, that doesn't really fit back to what I'm trying to build here. And I think that's a critical piece that we sometimes don't always dive deep into. We're either like, okay, listen to your clients. And if you're listening to your clients, how do you listen to your clients, right? And I thought that you articulated that really, really well. So I just wanted to bring up that additional point. I love what you said.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Awesome. Okay, so now we're going to actually get close to the end of this, and we want to end it with the leadership voice, actually the internal versus the brand voice, your external. How do you keep your voice consistent across audiences, whether it be your team, your customers, your partners, and most importantly, while still adapting the message without feeling like you're being performative?
Yeah. It's hard to not feel like you're being performative from a business lens, right? There's a certain way to carry yourself. There's a certain way to speak. There's obviously the age-old concept of code switching, right? Where you speak like this when you're in a meeting, and that's not really your natural tonation and your natural vocabulary, but that's a part of the business world, right? You have to speak, or generally speaking, you have to act and speak in a certain way. Of course, unless you're like a billionaire founder who's like, listen, I can do whatever I want, it doesn't matter. But we're not at that level yet. So I think it's difficult, but I think one of the things that helps ground me is that I genuinely, actually care about my corporate clients, my users on the Ani platform, and the cultural and experiential partners that we have, right? Every time someone books an experience, when it's with someone else, so I can see that they have their family, I get happy, I get excited, this is why we built the app, right? This is why we built the platform. This is why we're doing the work that we're doing, because we do believe that our product literally has the ability to have people live more holistic lives and just be happier in general. And of course, helping cultural institutions be more financially stable and sustainable, helping companies attract and retain talent. These are all great things, but at the end of the day, our impact on people and the people that we touch through our product is what's most important to us. So although it may, although the weekend email or the catch up call may feel performative at times, because we can, and because I can always anchor on our overall mission, it's just the nature of the business, right? We have to sometimes speak and engage in a certain way, but the hope is that the ethos of what Ani is still coming out, right? And that we're not basically lying, right? Hopefully we are truth tellers always.
I love that. And I really want to thank you for your time today. I love this conversation. It's really critical for founders to hear and understand, what it takes to build a business and some of the key fundamentals in finding your voice. So thank you. We really appreciate it. For our audience, please please share. And where can our audience best find you? Now, obviously, we shared the website earlier on, but if you can just address them and let them know where's best to find you.
For sure. Well, one, Kristina, thank you for having me. Really great conversation. Really appreciate the time and all the questions. So where you can find me and my company, Ani. So of course, there's the website, alwaysani.com. That's always ending in an S, ANI.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn, probably one of the best places to find us, at Ani. It might be always Ani always Ani or always ANI as well on the end of that URL. And then of course me, Emeka Kanu, EMEKA KANU, either on LinkedIn and probably even on Instagram if you want. But my page is private, so probably not.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time today and look forward to seeing you all on the next episode.